Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Carter Sickels, and I'm going to read from my novel, The Evening Hour. I'll give you a little bit of setup. The novel takes place in West Virginia, in the coal fields, contemporary, well, it's like mid-2000, early 2007. And the main character is a nurse's aide at a nursing home. He also is a small-town drug dealer. And his family lives on this land where mountaintop removal coal mining is sort of happening up above them. So that's sort of a big part of a thread of the book. But otherwise, I'm just going to read from the beginning, and I'll read a little section of him with his grandmother at home, and then a little section of him at his job. Cole double locked the trailer door behind him, then stood on the top rickety step for a moment, still waking up. Gunmetal sky with the faintest hint of light rippling at the edges. There was a tight chill in the air on this early April morning, and he shuddered, rubbing his bare arms. The air smelled like sulfur and scorched earth. He started his pickup, let it warm up a minute. He just bought the Chevy off his twin cousin's. Piece of shit, busted taillight, a rusted out hole in the floor of the passenger side that he covered with cardboard so that dust and gravel didn't shoot up into the cab. Instead of heading out, he drove up to his grandparents'. The lights were on, blazing yellow squares beckoning him. He knew his grandmother would be up. She didn't sleep much. Cole was the same way. He saw her looking out the kitchen window, her pale, moony face always worried. The house was warm and smelled like frying bacon. Cole wiped his feet on the welcome mat and tightened the drawstring waist of his scrubs, which were too big for him, the cuffs spilling over his black high tops. He glanced at himself in the mirror by the front door. It had been a late night, and he looked rough. 3-day-old beard, beak of nose, thick lips, goat eyes, small and sleepy. His scruffy, bleached-out hair made him look like somebody else. "I've got breakfast ready," his grandmother greeted him. "I can't stay. Gotta get to work." In pictures from her youth, his grandmother was thin and willowy, but he'd only ever known her as stout, with sausage-link fingers and doughy flesh. Her hair in a bun was the color of gravel. This morning she wore a button-down denim shirt pulled over a thin housecoat and mint-green slippers, her white-as-bone ankles thick and swollen like they'd been injected with something. She pinched his arm. "You set neat and put some meat on those bones." "Grandma, I just stopped in for a minute." She was studying him. "Well, I can see you did that foolishness to your hair again." "It'll grow back," he added defiantly. "Anyway, I like it. I don't know why you'd want to mess with its natural color. If God wanted you to have blonde hair, he would have given it to you." "Well, anyway, I just came by to check on Granddaddy." Yesterday, she had called to tell him that his grandfather was throwing a fit. Cole hadn't listened to the message until he rolled in at 3 a.m. "Sorry I couldn't get over here last night," he said. "He's all right now." She shook her head. "It was the blasting. Lord, he thought it was the end of the world. You never heard such carrying on," she said. "You smell the sulfur?" "Yeah, I figured." Whenever the coal company blasted the mountain, the walls of Cole's trailer trembled, the floors vibrated. His friends told him to take the money and run. The other day he found rocks the size of basketballs in his yard. His grandmother's eyes darkened behind the thick lenses of her glasses. "You look at what they've done." He followed her through the sparsely decorated house. Nothing hung on the walls save a few family pictures and framed Bible inscriptions. Cole's grandfather believed that austerity led to a clean, healthy soul. In the hallway, she pointed out the jagged cracks. "Maybe I can patch that up," Cole said. "You can't patch nothing up. It's not just the walls. They've done ruin the foundation. This house is sinking." His grandmother logged the time and details of every blast in a legal pad, the chart now a dozen pages long. This seemed to give her some kind of satisfaction and hope, even if it was a waste of time, just like all the calls she'd made to government agencies. Cole traced the cracks in the wall. They ran up from the floor, broke off, and spread near the ceiling, splintered and spidery like the lines in his own hands. "It's nothing that can't be fixed," he said. His grandfather was asleep in the lazy boy, one side of his face frozen from a stroke a few years ago. He'd had what the doctors called mini strokes, which did not alter his face, but ate away. That ate away at his brain like acid. Every day he said fewer words. "Dementia, similar to Alzheimer's," said the slick doctor in Charleston, who would not look Cole or his grandmother in the eyes. "When you look at him sleeping like that, he looks almost gentle, don't he?" Cole agreed that he did and touched his grandfather's cool, waxy brow, but he did not stir, breathing in kitten-like breaths. His thin hair lay in streaks as if painted on. On the stand next to his chair was the King James, and with its cracked spine, delicate pages. His grandfather no longer read, but sometimes he still opened the Bible and stared at it. He used to quiz Cole on Bible verses. It was the only thing his granddaddy wanted him to learn. Fortunately, Cole was good at memorizing. The verses stayed with him, even now. I wish you'd take him off that waiting list, Cole said. If he goes into the nursing home, it'll be the end of him. You'll be there with him. You'll take care of him. He can't go in there. His grandmother looked away. Come on and get a bite to eat. I gotta go, he said. At least let me make you a plate. Cole followed her into the kitchen. She filled a plate with strips of bacon, scrambled eggs, and biscuits, and poured coffee into a thermos. It was black and steaming. Cole's granddaddy didn't even drink coffee. That's how pure he was. She handed him the plate, covered in tinfoil, and he thanked her, but before he could head out, she stopped him. Rebecca and me talked last night. She wants me to move in with her and Larry. She took off her glasses and cleaned the lenses on her shirt tail. It's something I've got to consider. He tried to read her expression. About a year ago, when he asked if she wanted to take the coal company's latest offer, she said, "There's nowhere else at his home." He wasn't surprised about his Aunt Rebecca. All three of his aunts had been talking to him about it. But he stood behind his grandmother. Now he said, "You're backing out." "I ain't," she snapped, then softer. "But things are changing. I got a bad feeling about the land. I've been having dreams." Cole gulped the coffee, burning his mouth. He did not want to hear about her dreams and prophecies, all her worry. The only good thing he'd ever done was to stick by the land and the couple who had raised him. 2 years ago, his aunts sold off their parcels of land one by one, and when Cole had said, "Well, I'm staying," his grandfather just looked up at the sky like he didn't even hear him. Cole backed out of the driveway, the thermos of coffee resting between his legs. There was only one road that ran through Rock Camp, and his grandparents' property, tucked in a hillside, was at the end of it, where the rutted asphalt turned to dirt and clear land gave way to forest. The 20 acres, now whittled down to 14, had originally belonged to Cole's great-great-grandfather. For over 200 years, the Freemans have been on this land. Cole's grandparents still lived in the same house where they'd been all their married lives. His aunts and uncles and cousins used to live on the small plots around them, but they had moved away, spread out across West Virginia and beyond. Cole lived on a slivered portion of land that would have gone to his mother if she was around. He drove past his single wide, which sat close to the road, the hills looming behind it. Sometimes when they blasted, the trailer was engulfed in a cloud of dust. The heritage mining operation up above them had grown to 1,800 acres. It wasn't like the old days of sending men underground. Now, to get to the layers of coal seams, they blew off the mountains, bringing them down hundreds of feet and then pushed the rubble into the valleys. It was impossible to grasp the enormity of 1,800 acres. That was almost 1,800 football fields. He'd never seen the site. It was guarded and blocked off, and from here it looked as if the mountain was still standing. Behind the ridge it was a different story. He wondered what his grandmother had seen in her dreams, the holiness that God gave people gifts. Cole did not have a gift. He did not speak in tongues or handle snakes or see the future. His grandmother said he needed to open himself up to the Holy Ghost. He'd grown up knowing there was another world beyond this one. There was more than a person could see with just his eyes. He approached Route 16, the main road that ran along Dove Creek, the only road that led him out. Turned right, he'd pass by the processing plant where the coal was cleaned and shipped out across the country. The leftover waste was then pumped into a basin on the mountain and held back by a giant dam, the sludge dam, out of sight, out of mind. Turn left, he would head in the direction of Stillwell, the only real town in the area. Eventually, that way, Route 16, he would connect to the other roads, which led him to highways, which could take him far away from West Virginia. He turned left. The sky was lighter, a glowing pink in the east, the air warmer. He drove down the mountain with his elbow resting out the open window, his hand lightly guiding the wheel. The craggy land rose up all around him, pressing in on both sides of the road. Plumes of mist spiraled up from the dips and valleys, the ghosts of the Cherokee and mountaineers, his grandmother would say. He rounded sharp curves and switchbacks, occasionally looking down into a hollow where the houses huddled together like scared children. He drove by dilapidated clapboard homes, deserted churches, shot-up road signs, and little white crosses with plastic flowers commemorating the dead. All of it was as familiar to him as his own skin. Cole had lived here for all of his 27 years, except for a few months after graduation when he moved to Charleston. He used to dream about leaving for good. In high school, he and Terry Rose made up plans to run away, never come back. All that seemed like a long time ago. I was going to read a couple of moments from the scene at the nursing home. where he's a nurse's aide. He spent the early hours emptying bedpans, brushing teeth and dentures, and giving sponge baths. Sometimes when he woke the old people, they started like frightened deer or talked to him as if they were still dreaming. Others, wide awake, demanded sweet rolls and coffee. He helped two ladies into the cafeteria, which smelled like eggs and lemon disinfectant, and then loaded trays into a breakfast cart. He would like to sit and talk with a few of his favorite residents, but there was little time for breaks. He needed a smoke, but he kept moving. Larry Potts was parked in a wheelchair, twiddling his thumbs. He had thick, meaty hands, but his thumbs twirled like little jewelry box ballerinas. Scenes like this still managed to stop Cole in his tracks. He put his hands over Larry's, felt his thumbs buzz against his palms like insect wings. Larry used to work the deep mines, crawling around on his hands and knees in the dark. "It's okay, Larry," he said, wheeling him into the cafeteria. The new resident, Warren Fletcher, with gleaming bald head and tongue lolling, looked like a wrinkled baby. He'd arrived yesterday. A bed had opened up after Raymond Willis died on the way to the hospital. There was a long waiting list, and when the old people were brought in, most of the time they never went back home. "Hey there," Cole said loudly. Warren opened his eyes, startled. Cole spent much of his day shouting, so even when he was not at work, he occasionally caught himself talking to people as if they were half deaf. Warren pulled his tongue back in his mouth like a lizard. "What's your name, son?" "I'm Cole. Who's your people?" "Freeman's up in Rock Camp. My granddaddy is preacher Clyde Freeman." Warren did 30 seconds. Warren didn't say if he knew his family or not. His hands were shaking too badly to hold the spoon, so Cole sat beside him and fed him the lukewarm oatmeal, dabbing at the corners of his mouth with a paper napkin. After a few bites, the old man's eyes closed and Cole pulled the blanket up to his chin and watched him. He looked harmless and near dead, hollowed out by too many years. Skip. He opens his drawer. He takes out a silver wristwatch, ticking, which he slipped in his shirt pocket. Worn brown leather wallet with $20, a driver's license, and a faded picture of a woman, all of which he put back intact. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of threadbare undershirts, a knotted hunting sock. He untied the thick knots and pulled out a roll of 50s. He stared at the money for a second, then returned it to the sock. Two aides walked by. Cole froze in the shadows. He waited until their voices died out, then he tucked the sock into the waistband of his jockeys and wheeled the breakfast cart out of the room. Thank you.